Ever felt totally tangled up in tenses? Or maybe you're constantly confused about where exactly to place your subject in a sentence? Well, you are in the absolute right place. Let's dive right into this explainer and demystify some of these grammar terms. The ones that sound like complicated legal jargon, but are really just simple, everyday formulas for storytelling and directing your listeners' attention. Today, we are breaking down the exact differences between direct and indirect speech versus active and passive voice. We're going to make this highly detailed, super understandable, and totally visual.
To make this super easy to digest, here is our agenda. We're going to cover 1. Decoding speech and voice, 2. Mastering reported speech, 3. The backshift rules, 4. Active versus passive voice, 5. The passive flip formula, and finally, 6. The ultimate grammar showdown.
Section 1. Decoding speech and voice, the foundation of communication. Okay, before we get into the heavy rules, let's establish exactly what we mean when we talk about changing the form of our sentences. This comparison right here brilliantly illustrates the immediate contrast between giving someone an exact quote versus reporting that message indirectly. Look at the left side. Ria said, "I am happy." In this scenario, you're basically acting as a human tape recorder, repeating her exact words, complete with quotation marks. But on the right side, Ria said that she was happy. You've absorbed the information and you're now summarizing it from your own perspective. Notice how those quotation marks just disappear?
Section 2. Mastering reported speech. Passing on the message.
Let's move to our first major topic, reported speech. This is where we stop quoting directly and start summarizing what other people have told us. Honestly, this is an incredibly common everyday skill, whether you're catching up with a friend over coffee or writing a formal business email. Imagine a colleague tells you, "I am going to the office." When you're speaking directly to someone, you use their exact words in the present moment, which we visually anchor with those quotation marks. It's immediate. It's happening right now. But what happens when you need to tell your boss about this conversation 3 hours later? You can't just repeat, "I am going," because, well, you aren't going, and it's no longer happening in the present.
To effectively report what they said later on, you just need to follow this amazingly simple 3-step mathematical formula. Step 1, add a reporting verb like said or told. Step 2, backshift the tense into the past because remember, the moment of speech has already passed. And step 3, change the pronouns so they make logical sense in your new sentence. So I smoothly becomes he or she.
Section 3, the backshift rules, stepping back in time.
So the core metaphor of reported speech is this backshift. When we use reported speech, we are quite literally stepping back in time. English has 12 basic tenses. I know, it sounds like a lot, but if you just focus on shifting present actions to past actions, you've literally won half the battle. Think about it. Present simple becomes past simple. So, I am busy logically becomes, he said he was busy. Present continuous becomes past continuous. The phrase, I am reading, seamlessly turns into, she said she was reading. And look at those modals at the bottom. They take a step back too. Will drops back to would, can drops to could, and must turns into had to. If you just take a moment to internalize this backshift logic, constructing reported speech becomes an absolute breeze. And because time and location literally shift when you report a conversation later, the vocabulary has to keep up, right? Words like today naturally become that day. Tomorrow becomes the next day. If someone says they're doing something now, well, when you report it later, it was happening then. And here becomes there. You're simply aligning your words to fit the new reality of when you're speaking. However, here is absolutely crucial point. There is always an exception. If someone states a universal truth, like the sun sets in the west, or an ongoing habit, like I love my parents, the tense stays exactly the same in reported speech. Why? Because the fact is still true right now. The sun hasn't changed its behavior, and that love for the parents is still ongoing. You wouldn't backshift it to the past because that would imply it's no longer true, which just wouldn't make sense.
Section 4, active versus passive voice, the form of action. Okay, let's shift gears completely and transition from how we report speech to how we frame action, otherwise known as grammatical voice. If reported speech is about manipulating time, voice is entirely about manipulating focus. Think of active voice on the left as the action hero focusing on the doer, the subject, the cat, is actively performing the verb. The cat chased the mouse. It's direct, it's punchy. But the passive voice on the right, that's the detective's view, focusing on the evidence or the target of the action. The mouse was chased by the cat. The action itself, or the receiver of the action, suddenly becomes the star of the sentence.
Section 5. The passive flip formula restructuring sentences.
Transforming an active sentence into a passive one might seem daunting at first, but it is actually just another simple grammatical equation. Let's break down the mechanics. To execute the passive flip, you just follow 4 precise steps. First, you move the object to the front of the sentence. Boom, it gets promoted. Second, you add a helping be verb, like is, was, or will be. Third, you change your main verb to the past participle form, often called V3, like written, eaten, or sung. Finally, you tack on the original doer at the very end using the word by. This table right here acts as your ultimate cheat sheet, showing how a helping verb perfectly aligns the tense. Let's trace it together. If the active sentence is in the simple present, like Rita writes a letter, the passive flip makes it is written, so you get a letter is written by Rita. If it's past tense, wrote becomes was written. Notice how the helping verb was firmly anchors it in the past. And future tense, will write, stretches out to will be written. The golden rule here is that you never actually change the time the event happened. You just use that specific helping verb to keep the time consistent while completely shifting the spotlight over to the receiver.
But you've got to be careful, because you literally cannot use the passive voice on sentences without an object. These are called intransitive verbs. For example, you can't passively flip the sentence, he sleeps, or they laughed. There's no object receiving the action to pull to the front of the sentence. So if there's no object, the passive flip formula simply cannot compute. Just a little trap to watch out for.
Section 6. The ultimate grammar showdown, speech versus voice.
Now that we've mapped out both rule sets in detail, let's bring it all together in a side-by-side comparative showdown to ensure you never confuse these two concepts again. People often mix them up because both involve manipulating the form of a sentence, but their goals are entirely different. Remember, direct and indirect speech is all about managing perspective and time when reporting words. You're dealing with reporting verbs like said or asked, and you are mostly shifting things back in time. Whereas active and passive voice is simply about shifting the spotlight between the doer and the action, within the exact same time frame. You are playing with helping verbs like was or is to rearrange the furniture of the sentence, so to speak.
All right, let's test your comprehension with a quick mini quiz based directly on what we just covered to see if you can apply these formulas in real time. First up, how would you report Sia's statement? Sia said, I can swim. Think about that 3-step backshift rule we discussed earlier. Take a second. Got it? And here is the answer. If you remembered to optionally use that, change the pronoun I to she, and logically backshift the modal can into the past tense could, you absolutely nailed it. Sia said that she could swim. Great job. Fantastic. Now let's try the other formula. How do you flip this active sentence about Ram into the passive voice? Ram painted the wall. Look for the object, find the verb tense, and apply the flip. Give it a shot. And here's the solution. By moving the object, the wall, to the front, identifying that painted is past tense, and therefore adding the past tense helping verb was, keeping the past participle painted, and ending with by Ram, you've successfully created a passive sentence. The wall was painted by Ram. Perfect. We've covered a ton of ground today, completely decoding the architecture behind how we actually communicate. Now that you hold the exact formulas for manipulating time and reported speech and shifting focus in your actions using the passive voice, the real question is, how will you use these tools to elevate your own communication today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I challenge you to go out and spot these grammatical structures in the wild. See you next time.